haven't bought a loaf of bread in 6 months because I've been making this in my bread maker. If you find sourdough a challenge to fit into your life, get your bread machine to help out. I stopped making sourdough for years because it was so time consuming. Now I make it every week. The process is mostly hands-off, it'll save you money, and you only need 4 ingredients. Remember to hit the subscribe button for more bread maker content. Your sourdough starter needs to be robust and active, as we're not using any store-bought yeast here. The total hands-on time is under an hour, spread across 3 days, and I bake my bread in a Dutch oven, but you don't need one. I'll show you another method later in the video. Don't let the lack of a Dutch oven stop you from giving this a go. The night before I make my dough, I feed my starter. This is Oscar, and he needs to be fed twice before I bake. You may be able to get away with 1 feed, but Oscar isn't quite up to that yet. 10 grams of starter gets mixed with 15 grams of flour and 15 ml of water, 40 grams total. I'm currently using a 1 to 1.5 ratio, and for the first feed I use a mixture of wholemeal rye and strong white bread flour. You could just use white flour, but a lot of people find that their starters love rye. Good morning, time for Oscar's second feed. 30 grams of starter plus 45 grams of white flour plus 45 ml of water, 120 grams total. Set a timer for 4 hours. The starter doesn't need to be at its peak when you use it. It'd be nice, but I don't worry about it too much. Fermento yeast stage, mixing starter, flour and water. I thought this was auto yeast, but that is just mixing flour and water. So we'll go in with 80 grams of starter, and I have made a bit more starter than I need because I then put the excess back into the starter in my fridge, and that way my starter is always evolving, and when I end up with too much starter, that's when I make sourdough pancakes. I use 2/3 strong white bread flour and 1/3 wholemeal. I like to include wholemeal because I'm obsessed with fibre, and also my husband Col is type 1 diabetic, so we try to eat whole grains wherever we can, just to prevent large blood sugar spikes. You can just use white flour and you will get a better rise because wholemeal flour includes bran, and the bran acts like tiny little knives, slicing and damaging the gluten, and it is the gluten that gives you a strong dough. But for me, I am happy to sacrifice a bit of rise in my bread in order to get more fibre in there. Right, I'm going to measure now. I'm just going to concentrate. I'll put cup measurements into the description, but I am not confident with cups. I always weigh. Right, we've got 400 grams of flour. Now we'll go in with 280 ml of room temperature water. I will pop a link to my review of this water filter in the description. Oh, this bit's important. Put your salt somewhere where you won't forget it. We're not going to use it just yet. I'm going to put it in my bread machine. Now we mix. So I start off with a spoon, and then I will get in there with my hands in a bit to make sure all the flour is incorporated. I don't mix this in the bread pan because it would get really messy. Right, that's come together. Pop a tea towel over it. And I am going to set a timer for 45 minutes. Siri, it doesn't have to be 45, you could do 30 minutes, an hour, it doesn't really matter. Look at this absolutely grim weather. It is a good day to stay in and bake bread. Salt. Don't do what I did, which was to decide the dough was going in at a funny angle, lift it back out, which then took the bread paddle with it, and then that was a nightmare to get back in. 10 grams of salt. I'm using kosher salt, which isn't a very salty salt. I started buying it after I read Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat, which is an amazing book, and I buy diamond crystal kosher salt from Amazon. A box lasts for absolutely ages. If you've got sea salt, start with 6 grams. It does look like quite a lot, but the bread doesn't taste overly salty. Okay, into the bread machine. The cycle lasts for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it starts with a 30-minute rest. I will pop the steps up on screen because you don't need to use this particular bread maker. You could use any bread maker. You just want the basic dough program. And this bit of the whole process is why this sourdough loaf is fitting into my life so well. Basically, now it's gone in, I have a window of about 7 to 10 hours where I don't have to touch the dough, I don't have to think about it. I can just go about my day. I'm not setting a timer every 30 minutes to come back and coil fold. I love this method. The bulk ferment timings will depend on the climate you live in. So when I started making sourdough in a bread machine, it was summer here in the UK, and on the hottest day, my dough rose to the top of the bread pan in 5 hours, and I've not seen that since. Now it's autumn coming into winter here, and my rise is much more slow. I look for my dough to at least double, but ideally a bit more than that, and that's why I feed my starter twice. When I fed it once, the dough just felt so weak, and after a few hours of bulk fermenting, I could still see the bread paddle through the dough, which meant that it hadn't risen much. But I baked that loaf and it still tasted fine. And something else that's nice about this process, I have not had a loaf of bread that I couldn't eat yet. Some of them are flatter than I would like, sometimes they have air pockets, doesn't matter, they still taste great. Stop. Right, the programme has finished. I am just going to leave the dough in there. I'm not going to open it because I want the heat to stay in there and for it to continue to rise. I'm just going to get on with the rest of my day now. I'm going to do some dinner prep, I'm going to go to the gym, and then I will shape the dough around 8 p.m. tonight. This is the bit I've not been looking forward to because my shaping is not brilliant. This is a 70-ish% hydration dough, so it's really sticky. I don't bother with a pre-shape, I just do one shape and then it goes straight into a banneton. You don't need a banneton, you could just use a bowl. All right, here we go. I find if I don't spray the banneton, the flour just doesn't stick to it at all. Now, some people say you shouldn't let moisture anywhere near your bannetons because they can get mouldy, but I think this is fine. It dries out each time. I brush the flour off. Here is the dough. Out it comes. Wish me luck. Come on, don't be shy. Can you see how sticky it is? Whoop. I'll stretch it out now and pop any bubbles. Then I fold it in on itself. And then I do some burrito rolls. And this is where I've been going wrong. I think 2 burrito rolls is probably enough, but I just keep on going. I'm not sure why. I so want to look really competent at this, but I am just not there yet. But I think you'll see the bread still comes out okay. It's in a sort of log shape, but and it's sticking to itself quite well, but I'm going to do one more burrito roll. All right, I'm going to leave it there now. I want it to hold a log shape. The one thing I do think is with all the rolling, I think it works a lot of the air bubbles out. Well, that's what I tell myself anyway. This has got to be the worst shaping anyone has ever done on camera before. All right, last roll. Right, there, it's going in the banneton. It's going in. Stitch the top. Pop its hat on. And into the fridge. Just wipe the bottom. That was so bad. All right, that's enough sourdough adventures for today. Tomorrow is a new day. Preheat your oven to 240 degrees C fan or 465 Fahrenheit for 30 to 45 minutes. I put my Dutch oven in upside down because it's easier to lower the dough into the shallow lid rather than the deep pot. Scrunch up the baking paper to make it more pliable and to avoid getting those weird wavy folds when the paper cuts into the bread. You're supposed to spray after scoring, but oh well. I'll link to some videos on scoring because again, I haven't quite mastered it. I try to cut almost horizontally with a sharp razor. Into the Dutch oven with some ice to create steam. Lid on, and I found that offsetting the handles helps with getting the lid off later. Bake for 45 minutes, then remove the lid and bake uncovered for 2 minutes. You may need to experiment with timings. This is the result of yesterday's shaping. Not my best rise if I'm honest, but I feel like it's important to show the reality of this technique. Some weeks I get a really good shape, a really good crumb, other weeks not so much. Quite a closed crumb on this one. I was disappointed with yesterday's loaf. I think that's obvious. It just wasn't representative of what I've been baking recently. And I thought, why is this loaf different? And then I realised it's the temperature. It had its bulk ferment on a cold day. Now I had another loaf on the go, which I was planning to not bake in a Dutch oven because I know not everybody has one and I want to experiment. And I thought, okay, forget that, try that next week. Make sure this loaf bulk ferments in a warm house. So I put my heating on and we are in a modernish terrace house. The house heated up quickly. And when I got to the dough at 10 p.m. at night, it had risen 3/4 of the way up the bread pan. So I shaped it, did an average job, and baked it this morning, and this is what I've got. Now, it's gone more out than up, but this is more like what I've been getting in terms of size and just the crust. So let's cut into it and check out the crumb. We've got an air pocket, but it's definitely a more open crumb. Here's a comparison with yesterday's loaf. Preheat your oven to 230 degrees C or 445 Fahrenheit. 2 trays on the bottom. The top tray helps to create a more enclosed environment for the steam. I would avoid glass or stoneware dishes in case they crack or explode. I've gone for stainless steel. 5 minutes before baking, pour freshly boiled water into one tray. Tip the dough onto baking paper, then slide it onto a preheated tray. Finally, tip some ice into the other tray. It's a lot of trays, I know. Bake for 20 minutes, then remove both bottom trays and turn the heat down to 210 degrees C. Check the bread after 15 minutes. I give it 20 in total. All done. Make sure to let the bread cool before slicing into it to avoid a gummy crumb. It's very similar to yesterday's Dutch oven loaf, but the crust is a different colour and it feels a lot crunchier. If it's too crunchy for you, drape a tea towel over the loaf as soon as it comes out of the oven. The steam will help to soften the crust. I store my bread in a cotton bag inside my bread bin, and that tends to soften the crust overnight too. I think they're decent. They're not flawless, but they taste great, and it's home cooking, so they don't need to be perfect. I'll carry on making videos as I hopefully improve, so do subscribe to get future updates. A strong starter is key. Someone on the sourdough subreddit gently told everyone off for overthinking sourdough. They said something along the lines of, if you've got a really strong active starter, you just can't go too far wrong because the hard work is done. I think they've got a point. What do you think? Is it cheating to use a bread machine? Do you think you'll give this a go? Let me know in the comments, I would love to hear from you. I will pop my bread machine playlist on the screen now. Do take a look, there is a sultana loaf in there and some cinnamon rolls too. Thanks for watching. I haven't bought a loaf of bread in 6 months because I've been making this,